Hi, this is Kevin Trainer. Welcome to my tutorial on creating use case diagrams with Visio 2016. So in the last unit in our course, we used data flow diagramming to create context diagrams. And use case diagrams are similar documents. They're a newer methodology. So data flow diagrams were part of structured analysis and design, which came into vogue starting in the 1970s. And use case diagrams are a part of object-oriented analysis and design, and that came into vogue in the late 1990s, early 2000s, somewhere like that. And so they're different, but they occupy the same kind of place in that they both do a really good job of showing the scope of the system. The scope of the system in terms of who is going to interact with our system solution. So what users are included in our scope. And then what kind of functions are we going to have in the system? What kind of problems and opportunities are we going to solve for that user group? So I just want to go back and look at the sample context diagram that we created in the last of our tutorials. It's really funny. I had this at a bigger. There it is. There it is. Yeah, it's looking bigger right there. So I had it at a bigger resolution before. So the sample that I'm using to create the use case diagram, you're going to use the same example problem. It's the attendance system. And as you remember, the attendance system had three groups of users: instructors, students, and a system admin. Okay? And the instructor was going to set up a class and get a confirmation back. Was going to add, change, or delete registration for students in the class and get confirmations back. And request a summary report and get a summary report back. The student was going to log an attendance report to say that they were present at a particular class session and get a confirmation back. And they were going to request their own summary report and get a summary report back. And then the system admin was going to request authorization for a particular user, and they would get a confirmation back that that user had been authorized. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take those facts and we're going to build a use case diagram, actually a set of use case diagrams for the attendance system. So let's do that. And we're going to be using Visio 2016. So let's go fire that up. Visio 2016 is down here, I think under V. There it is. So fire that up. Okay. And again, it might be easier to find my way to the diagram I'm looking for, but I'm going to kind of go the long way. So if you haven't been there recently, you'll be able to find your way. Click on categories, okay, and within that, software and database, okay. And we want UML use case right there. And I always pick US units because I'm in the US, and I click on create. And here we are. Okay. So it looks like, for instance, that our electronic paper is in the landscape position, because I think that's where I had it last when we were doing the context diagram. And people typically put the electronic paper in the portrait position for this. So let's go to design and orientation, and let's pick portrait. Okay, and that's going to solve that problem right there. So then we can go back to home. You can see over here on the left side that we have a bunch of symbols. Okay, we have an actor symbol. Okay, it's not really a stick figure. It really does look like the symbol on the door of the men's room. We have a use case symbol. It's a an ellipse or an oval. We have a subsystem, and that's the system boundary box. Okay, so this is what's going to go around the use cases that are on the diagram. And then we have an association line, is what we use to connect the actors to the use cases. And of course, they cross over the boundary box. There are a couple of other symbols on here that are kind of interesting if you want to use some more advanced use case features, including having use cases include or extend each other, or to show dependencies, or that something's a generalization. These are all things that I truly believe are just going to confuse the beginner, and these aren't features that we're going to be using. So we're just going to be using these 4 top symbols up here. Okay. I also want to point out that whereas we were doing context diagrams a little while ago, it's customary to have one context diagram. And I know I got some feedback from some of my students that said, geez, it was hard to get all the functionality that we wanted in one diagram. And I said, yeah, but traditionally we try to find some way to squeeze it in. Here on use case diagrams, we can have multiple diagrams, and we have this idea that we have one big kind of virtual diagram, and that we divide it up into what we call packages. So we take different subsets of the use cases, and we collect them onto individual pages. And we call each of those pages a package. And it's just essentially a theme for the use cases that are there. There's a lot of ways that you can organize them. I tend to organize them by the people who are the actors in the use case, because it allows me to show just one diagram or a few diagrams to a group of people when I go to talk to them. So they don't have to see the use cases that don't apply to them. So we're going to have more than one piece of paper here, which is going to be a change from what we did the last time. So how are we going to do this? Well, I'm thinking that we're going to have, let's pull out this boundary box here. Okay. All right. And that's pretty good. Maybe that's a little wide. Maybe we have a little bit more room for our stick figures, huh? Okay. All right. And then we've got a name. So we're going to call the name. I'm going to, if you remember who the users were, we have instructors, we have students, and then we have a system admin. So I'm going to have student facing use cases. That's one package. Okay. And then let's do those, and then we'll move on to the next one. Right. So we're going to have three packages: student-facing use cases, instructor-facing use cases, and something that we call administrative use cases, which are they're going to be the ones that involve the system admin. Okay. Okay. So who's involved in student-facing use cases? Well, geez, student, right? So we pull on an actor symbol, double click on it, and it wants us to give a name, we'll just say student. Okay. And okay, I got interrupted there, and I'm just back now. So if it seems like I was interrupted, that's because I was. So here we are. We're looking at the student-facing use cases, and gonna increase the magnification on this a little bit. Go down here in the lower right, pull that bar across. Student-facing use cases, and there we are. That's not too bad. So there are two things that the student needs to be able to do with the system. If you remember, we had two kind of cycles of interaction in the context diagram. So typically that's going to correspond to two use cases. So I want to bring them both out. So I just click on the use case symbol and I pull that out right here. All right. And let's see, is that in about the middle of the page? Well, I can tidy that up a little bit. And I'm going to bring out another one. Okay. So let's think about what we want to do. So let's call the first one log attendance. Okay. Okay. And I just double clicked on that, and then I typed it in. Now I'm going to click outside that that symbol. And that seems to have worked pretty well. I like the type on that. And the other thing I had was kind of a summary report. Okay. And the last time I did this use case diagram, I called this use case generate student attendance report. And that, I think that's really good enough for me. So I'm going to double click, say generate student, and then I'm going to hit carriage return attendance carriage return report. That way I can kind of control the type in the ellipse, and I see that the ellipse is a little small for that amount of type. So I'm gonna pull. I'm gonna look for a corner on this thing, and there we go. I clicked on it, and I got a resizing control. And I kind of like that. And if I pull it to the left, I think I can get it to center with the other one. I like that. I don't think they're really centered in the page, but that's okay. And I get something going on down here, some kind of line. I'm going to delete it. I don't know what that was. That's some kind of a little funny artifact. Okay, so I've got the actor symbol. All right. Log attendance, generate student attendance, report. These are my two use cases. I just want an association line to connect them. So if I come over here to the palette on the left, there's associations. I'm going to pull out a line, and I'm going to put the left part, I'm going to connect it to the student and let go. And then I'm going to pull the right connector up to log attendance. And when it highlights, I let go. And I'm going to click off of that. That looks like a good connection there. And let's do the same thing for the other one. So pull out the association line. I think we can probably connect it in just about the same spot. Well, okay, as soon as it highlights, I let go. And then pull it down to our use case. It highlights the use case, I let go. And there you are. And that's it. So in adding these association lines, I'm only saying one thing. Okay? It's not a very broad statement. I'm saying the student actor interacts with the use case, log attendance, and also so that's all. I'm just saying that there's an interaction with the use case. And now I'm seeing that my spelling on my second one's not good. So I'm going to go in and correct it. I double click to get into edit. And then I edit it. And now I clicked outside. And I'm saying the same thing with respect to the student, and it generates student attendance report. So notice that that's all we have. We have the actor symbol, we have the use case symbols, we have the two association connection lines, okay? They're crossing over the boundary box, okay? We were able to, when we pulled in the boundary box, which was called a subsystem on the diagram, we were able to give the package a name. So that's a group of use cases that's kind of packaged according to a theme. These are the ones that are primarily doing something for the student. Okay, well, that looks good. Let's shrink that page a little. And see if there's anything else we want to fix there. First of all, do we want to center these a little better? Maybe they were centered. Okay, maybe pull that one down a little bit. All right. So I'm not going to put a whole lot of use cases in here. Sometimes when you divide these things up into different pages for the individual packages, you might have a package that's kind of light on use cases. That's okay. Okay. So I like what we have for the student so far. Okay, so what I really want to do is I want to keep in the same diagram, right? Because this is really one use case diagram. I just want it to have multiple pages, and each page will show what I call a package within the use case model. So how do I get another page here? Well, typically, as soon as we begin to use what would be on another page, it creates another piece of electronic paper for us. So let's just take an actor symbol over here, pull it down to where page 2 would be, and hey, how about that? we have another piece of paper. That's good. Okay, so let's see, we have an actor there. In this case, let's have that actor be the instructor. Okay, and let's also have, let's pull a boundary box on it. Again, the label for the boundary box in this diagram, or this version of the diagram, is subsystem. So pull that over here. Okay. And now let's pull this down. Whoa, that's a little bigger than I wanted it to be. Skinny it up. Try to match it up with the box above it. That seems to correspond it pretty well. And I see where it has a name. Okay. And I'm going to say, call this instructor facing use cases. So you can really divide these up however you want. One of the things that the IBM guys have suggested is, at a minimum, that you separate the ones that are primarily having to do with the business and the ones that primarily have to do with the administration of the system. So the student-facing use cases that we have dealt with on the last page, those would be business use cases. The instructor-facing use cases will also be business use cases. And then the ones that have to do with logging in, authorizing, all that kind of stuff, we typically call those administrative use cases, and we segregate them into their own package. Okay, so one natural division is between business and administrative. That's a way to package it. But as soon as you get enough business use cases, you almost have to have more than one package for the business use cases, which is what we've done here. We've divided the business use cases up into student-facing and instructor-facing, and then we're going to have a third page with a package for administrative use cases. So let's get to work on our instructor-facing use cases. And I'm kind of cheating. I'm looking at the way that I did this the last time. And I don't really like the way that I did this the last time. So I'm going to go take a look at the diagram that we were looking at before, when we were looking at the come on, there, the context diagram. Okay, so I used to have a lot more individual interactions here. So here I kind of characterize this as the 3 cycles of interaction. 1 is to set up the class. 2 is to register the students. And the 3rd is to get the report. So let's think of having 3 use cases here. This is a little different than the last way I did it, but again, there's quite a bit of art to this. Okay? So put that there. Again, I think I want this to be a little closer in. Yeah. That looks good to me. So instructor-facing use cases looks good there. And then let's say that we've got 3 use cases. So let's pull out 1. And that's kind of centered. Okay. And then let's pull out number 2. That looks kind of centered. And pull out the 3rd use case. Collect and pull. That looks kind of centered too. And usually we try to get these things kind of centered with each other. So yeah, so now the instructor is kind of centered right there. I'm kind of liking that. I think if we pull the instructor from side to side, we might see what's about the middle. I think that looks about as good as it's going to get for right now. That's our instructor. So let's say that the first one has to do with setting up a class. Okay, so let's say set up new class. Okay, that's one. We're either going to register student or register students, and this is a nice distinction here. The question is, what's going to represent one iteration of the use case? Is the instructor going to register a whole class full of students, or is the instructor going to register them one at a time? The good thing about doing a whole class is you can think of doing it one fell swoop. The other thing is that then you get the idea that you might have to change them as a group and that kind of stuff. I like the idea of thinking of them as a kind of individual students. Okay, so I'm going to call this add slash change slash delete student registration. Okay, so this is one registration, and we're either going to be adding it or changing it or deleting it. And again, the text is a little bigger than the symbol, so we want to click on it till we get a box that allows us to pull it to be bigger, and that looks about the right size. And now we want to drag it till it's centered again, and that seems to be, is that centered? Yeah, it seems to be centered. Yeah, very good. Okay. And the other thing that we need to do is, last time we said generate, did we call it student attendance report? Okay, so let's call this one instructor attendance report. The requirements would be a little different for each one, right? So generate instructor I think I had generate in the first word up there together. Generate instructor, next character return attendance, character return report. Okay, click off. And again, we need to click, I'm going to click over about right here, and I got a resizing box. And again, I want this to be a little bit bigger. All right, and I'm going to get a little more vertical room here. We got those guys a little crowded to each other, but I kind of like that the way it is right there. So we've got three use cases. This setup new class replaces 3 or 4 different use cases that I had before that were less, they were more atomic. They were like create the semester, create the class, enter the class meeting schedule. I'm going to put that all into one use case. Okay. And now I just have to connect the actor with the use case with these association lines. So pull an association line on, connect it to the actor and let go. Pull the other end connector up to the use case, let that highlight and let go. And now we're going to do that for use case number 2. Okay, and use case number 3. Okay, so let's, okay, let the instructor highlight, let go, and then pull down to our use case, let that highlight and let go. And there we go. So if we go down to the lower right hand corner and we unzoom it a bit, we can see that those are pretty well centered in there. I think they look pretty good, so I think that's looking good. Now, I haven't saved my document yet, so I think I'm definitely going to want to save this. Let's see. I was on the wrong menu there. File, save as. Let's put it into documents for right now. Okay, and I'm going to name this in the convention that I have for the skills practice assignments. So I'm just going to use my last name, Trainer, and my first, Kevin, skills practice use case diagrams. And it's going to save a Visio drawing file, which is not what I'm going to submit. I'm actually going to submit a PDF, but I have to save it as a Visio drawing file before I save it as a PDF. Okay, so I've got that. And now I've got one more package. I talked about having administrative use cases. And I can't emphasize enough, these packages are arbitrary, right? We're trying to find a way to take all the functionality in the system and a way to focus on little subsets of it such that we wind up with use case diagrams that are easy to understand and easy to review with the stakeholders. So the one that we're looking at right now is easy to review with the instructor. The one before it is easy to review with the student. And then the third one that we're going to have, the administrative use case, we're probably going to review that with people who play a number of roles in our system. Okay. All right, so we've got one more package, which means we need to come up with a third sheet of paper. So again, we can do kind of the same thing here. A new piece of paper won't appear until we drag something onto it. So let's, in this case, let's pull an actor symbol on. Okay, as soon as we pull an actor symbol where sheet 3 would be, we get a sheet 3. Pretty good. Okay, and let's see. I've got two actors for this one, and this is where we're going to see a little difference between our kind of strategy for how we draw a context diagram, how that's going to be different here in use case diagrams. The first actor that I want is system administrator. System administrator. And again, you can use the carriage return to control the line breaks in these labels. Okay, so that looks good. And the other thing is, there are some things, the system administrator is going to be a role where you can authorize other users. So a system administrator, sort of like a super user, can authorize users to use our system. Kind of built in, somebody has to authorize the system administrator, but we're not going to worry about that too much. And then we're going to have a normal user. So a normal user is going to be another kind of actor who we're just going to call system user. So let's do that. System carriage return user. All right. Okay. Now we need to identify what package we're in. So again, we're going to pull this subsystem bounding box over. Okay. And let's back up just a little bit. let's try to line that up with the way it was lined up and upstairs there. So you can kind of see the lines appear. That's good. And let's pull down here. And usually you leave a little room down at the bottom. So something like that's probably pretty good. It's about even. So I like that. All right. And the name, I'm going to call these administrative use cases. Now, there's a lot of thinking around about how to structure your use cases. I've got, here in my home office, I've got maybe 20 books on how to do use cases the best way. Well, I think you can imagine that they don't all agree, right? So there's a subset of things on which they agree, and then there are a number of things on which they kind of go their own way. So they all agree that in use case diagrams that we can have either one really big use case diagram, or we can divide the diagram up into packages. And most of them favor the idea of doing the packages like we are here. And they all agree that the packaging is somewhat arbitrary, but then they try to find ways to characterize use cases in different ways. And I mentioned a popular one that the IBM guys like, business versus administrative. Now, the difference between those two is the IBM guys feel that the business use cases get real work done for real users. Administrative use cases take care of the care and feeding of the system. Okay, so the business ones feed the business, and the administrative ones feed the system. All right. So things like authorizing users, things like logging in, which are kind of accidents of the way that we have implemented security in our system, have this administrative kind of flavor. Now, of course, one person's business use case could maybe be, in terms of your perspective, another person's administrative use case. But I'm going to show you a couple here just to give you a feel for what I think proper administrative use cases are. And there's two that I always have, and I'd like to see you always have. One is called Authorized User. So let me pull that one out. Okay. And then the other one is called Login. All right. So let's double click on each of those, and let's type in the text for their name, Authorized User. And again, it's a verb, noun, phrase. Okay. Login is short for probably login to system. So it doesn't always have to be a verb, noun, phrase, but it is verby. Login. Right. Okay, we've got those two. So what's going on in Authorized User? Well, in Authorized User, a system administrator is telling the system that such and such a user is able to use the system, and typically the way that I set up these authorizations, these permissions, it's by role, by use case. Okay, so for instance, in a system administrator role, I would log in and say, Kevin is allowed to play the role of, and let's go back up, of instructor in the setup new class, or perhaps I just say he's allowed to play the role of instructor in all the use cases that an instructor is allowed to do. Sometimes I might want the permissions to be more fine-grained. I might say he's allowed to do set up new class. He's allowed to do add, change, delete student registration. That kind of thing. I might say that another user, perhaps one of the students, I was going to say that they have the permission to play the role of student. Okay, so those are the kind of authorizations that we're giving. So let's go down to this administrative package again. And again, let's zoom in a little bit so we can see better. Okay, I like that. So, who's involved in authorizing the user? Well, it's really easy to see that the system administrator would be involved in the authorized user use case. So in my early versions of this, I just pulled out my association line, hooked it up to system administrator, pulled it over to authorized user, and there I go, let it go. But then I realized, how does a normal system user who's using our system, how do they know that they've become authorized? Do we want the system to tell them that they are authorized? Well, how could they do that? Well, it might send them an automatic email. Okay. Or maybe when they log in. Well, no, they wouldn't know to log in. Perhaps we send them an automated email to say, you've been authorized to use the student attendance system. Here's your user ID and here's your temporary password. Okay, so then who else is interacting with authorized user? Well, every system user at the point that they get authorized is going to have an interaction with authorized user. So I want to pull another association line, hook it up to system user, and then I want to pull the other line up to authorized user. Okay. So probably the bulk of the interaction in the use case is going to go on with system administrator, but because the use case is going to notify the system user that they're authorized, or they've been deauthorized, whatever, I'm going to show them interacting with it. How do I know what's the scope of that interaction? How do I know how it happens? How does the data flow? What's the timing? You can't tell from the diagram. You have to go read the use case specification. That's how you find out. Okay, and then any old user, right, needs to be able to log in. Okay, so let's take the association and pull out the line connected between a system user and the login use case. Okay, great. Now, at this point, I think I'm pretty close to being done, but I want to point out a couple things. So before I forget, let's remember to save these changes. So let's say save. Okay. One of the things that is sometimes elusive to new users of use cases is this idea of actor as role. Okay. And we say it's not a job title. It's not a person's name. It's a role that somebody's playing vis-a-vis the system. So, for instance, one individual could play a lot of roles in the system. Let's take your typical student, right? So what roles would they play? Well, first of all, they'd be a system user because they need to be able to log in before they can run the student-facing use cases. So one of the things that we're going to find out when we learn how to do a use case specification is that use cases can have preconditions. And typically we express them into some other use case having run successfully. So when we come up here to the student-facing use cases, up here, come on up, slowly but surely. Okay, scroll up there. So, let's say we have a student, Mary, right? She plays the role of system user to log in. When she logs in, because she's been authorized, the system knows that Mary is allowed to play the role of student. So that means that Mary can play the role of student in log attendance and generate student attendance report. So Mary, the person, is represented in the use case diagram by two actors, the student and the system user. So let's talk about me. I'm Kevin, the instructor, and it turns out I'm also the system admin. All right, so let's talk about all the roles that I can play. Okay, so let's go down to the bottom here. So probably the first role I'll play is, well, we have to have a way for me to be able to log in. So between the system admin and the system user, we have a chicken and egg problem. So I've got to solve the problem of the first admin. But let's say that sometimes I'm going to play the role of systems administrator, in which case I can run authorized user. Okay. I can authorize any potential user of the system. When I do, the system's going to notify the user that they're authorized. Okay. Whenever I'm going to use the system, I log in as me. So I'm playing the role of system user in a login. Okay. Now, when I log in, because of the information that was kept in the authorized user use case, the system is going to know what roles I can play. And for me, it's going to know that I can play the role of instructor. So I can run setup new class. I can run add change, delete student registration. And I can run generate instructor attendance report. So I can play 3 of the 4 roles that appear on the diagram. So the actors are not individual people, okay? And they're not job titles, because I probably only have one job title when I'm doing all of those things. But I do play 3 roles vis-a-vis the system, and there's an actor representing each of the roles that I would play. Okay, so that's it for the diagram. So again, let's save. Okay, and then the other thing that we want to do is we want to submit a PDF. Okay, so we have a multi-page document here, and what we're going to do is we're going to say file. I believe I can do it in this product as a save as. Save as, go to documents, and this is the name of the diagram. And right now the file type is Visio drawing. I want to click and pick PDF, come down to PDF, and then I'm going to click on save. Okay, and now I'm done with my diagrammer. Oh, it's going to open the PDF for us. So here is the PDF. And again, somewhere here I can find my, there we are, thing to make it bigger. Okay, so there's my student-facing use cases on page 1. Whoa, got away from me there. And on page 2, I've got my instructor-facing use cases. And on page 3, I have my administrative use cases. So I've got one multi-page document. There are 3 pages in the Visio diagram file, and then when I did a save as a PDF, I got 3 pages in the PDF. And in my class, what we're going to hand in are the PDFs. Okay, and for those of you who can't use Visio and who can use Visual Paradigm, I'm going to have a companion tutorial for doing these same activities. I'm going to do the same thing using the Visual Paradigm product. So I wish you luck on your exercise where you do the same thing for a different case. And I'm going to say bye until next time. So good luck on that. Bye-bye.